All right, Madison, we have Renita Thomson with us. She is the International Coordinator of Discipling Marketplace Leaders, serving many countries across Africa. So we get to hear from her on how the pandemic is affecting the areas that she has contacts in, and how it's affecting her and her family. So Renita, thank you so much for being with us.
All right, thanks Jody, and thank you Madison and Madison's mission team. We are so thankful for your support, your encouragement, and your prayers. Let's see, end of February I was in Cameroon, and then from there went to Burundi and then to Zambia. And at each port of entry I had to have my temperature taken, and I had to declare a whole health worksheet on where I had been and how I'm feeling and where exactly I was sitting on the plane, if not in my assigned seat, and so on. And then by mid-March, I made it came back through Chicago, and didn't meet anybody in gloves or masks, didn't have to declare anything, didn't have to fill out a health form, and was just shocked that Africa was so far ahead of how to do screening in this pandemic. But very quickly became alarmed at the numbers. That was just the very next day they closed the Chicago airport and began to screen. I just began to be alarmed at the numbers of what we were seeing happening. And we work in 10 different countries in Africa. So in West Africa, we're in Ghana, Nigeria, Liberia, Cameroon, Burkina Faso. In East Africa, we're in Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Ethiopia. And then in Central Africa, actually Cameroon is Central Africa, and Burundi as well. And so we start talking to our partners, and we're starting to realize there's no capacity for people to stay in place. Shelter in place is a luxury. People don't have money to buy a month's worth of food to stay home. What do we do? And that's where I certainly identify with so many others who just started feeling overwhelmed. Africa can't deal with another pandemic like this. This is just going to be devastating across the country, and just crying out to God. And we started having daily prayer calls. We normally have weekly prayer calls. Every Tuesday morning we call in on Zoom, and for 10 years now, it wasn't Zoom always, but we started doing it daily with our team. And the first thing we did was phase one is we need to raise money for to help people get food to shelter in place. And so we were able actually to send in phase one. We're on phase three right now. So phase one of our response was sending $70,000 that we were able to raise for our 12 partners in 10 different countries. And that helped about 1,200 families, with $58 per family, get food for a month, theoretically, at least rice and oil. But we're like, it's nothing. That is nothing. I mean, you divide that up around 10 countries and how many cities. And so we just kept praying. And I remember we were on our prayer call, and we always have times of silence on a prayer call, which is awkward on Zoom, but we were learning how to do it very well. And just saying to God, where is the church's voice? Where is the church's voice in this? The government, we're looking to government, we're looking to medical, and discipling marketplace leaders is all about the church being the church every day of the week in every realm. And I remember God saying, or I felt like God was saying to me, use your sphere of influence. And it's like, we're this little tiny organization. I mean, we just became independent in January. We're 3 months old. And I felt like he said, didn't you tell, that I'd opened doors for you to so many denominations and so many churches? Use your sphere of influence. And so that was where phase two was born, where we then said, you know what, we've got 30,000 churches that we're working with through so many different denominations in so many countries. We know the head people. We need to build a coalition where we're saying we're not waiting for government to tell us when to shut down. And there was so much misinformation going on in Africa by the churches, pastors who didn't want to lose their source of income. So they kept calling for people to come to the church. The church is like a hospital. You don't shut the church down. You need to come. And so we got our denominational leaders on the phone, and we said, hey, we're getting a coalition together. We want you to sign this agreement that you're going to tell all of your churches to shut down, all of your churches to stop meeting, that you are going to tell all of your members to start wearing a mask. And then we developed a web page where we put up all sorts of appropriate information, theological as well as health because people were doing also the chloroquine and you know, taking all sorts of things to try to mitigate this. And so we built that coalition and really felt like that was a good response, and people were, you know, were getting on board with that, and that was exciting. But one of the things that I think probably everybody has heard is that people have in Africa have said this is a health pandemic, but it's going to turn into a hunger pandemic. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, health is actually the second tier. Hunger, food is the first tier. People are going to go for food before they are going to shelter in place. And so right now, with all the countries that are lifting these restrictions, like Sarah's talking about in Ghana, in so many different countries, we are going back to our coalition to say we need to keep wearing masks. We need to be committed to that. This morning, I was on a call for 2 hours with the head of the CDC Africa was on there and was really talking about the approach for what Africa needs to do. And so we're still trying to figure out what phase 3 is going to be. We've invited our partners to tell us, to dream with us, to think through, because the reality is, in Nigeria, our partners in Kaduna said, we can't, you know, farming is social distancing, but we can't farm because of kidnapping. In Cameroon, our people are telling us, we can farm, but to be honest, we're hungry now, we're eating the seed. In Kenya, they're dealing with flooding on top of, and mudslides on top of the pandemic. And so we know that come harvest time in the fall, our fall, which will be, you know, right now it's rainy season for a lot of countries, they're planting, there's not going to be a harvest. And so we're inviting proposals from our 12 partners, and a lot of them are coming back saying, we believe God's calling us to be Josephs. We need to do some storing up for the time when there's going to be a lot of hardships. And so, you know, we've gotten proposals of probably in excess now of $250,000 for requests. We don't have that. So we're just asking God to tell us how to respond for what is still coming. And they believe that if extreme measures aren't taken in sheltering in place, that there will be over 3 million cases in Africa. If there are better restrictions, wearing masks and sheltering in place, then they believe it will be 700,000. That's what the CDC was saying this morning. So, you know, we have an opportunity to have an influence, to tell people to take this serious and to be humble in this. Wear a mask, be humble, just accept that guidance. So yeah, it's been a difficult time, and yet it's been an incredibly rich time as well. Our prayer times have been so good, and we really believe, and like Diane was saying as well, we really believe that God is doing something. There's an opportunity here, and that's what we've been on our knees about, because whenever you have something like this, there's an opportunity for repentance, and there's an opportunity for revival. And we believe that you know, we don't want to miss this opportunity that God may have for us to join in what he is already doing for the church, first of all, to repent, that we need to be the church without walls. And we are hearing just incredible stories of household churches growing. And we're so excited about that. And our partners have said, we need materials, help us get materials for how people can leave their church in their home. And so we've been doing that. But the opportunity also for revival, for us to figure out what it means to be the church every day of the week, and what it means to love our neighbor, and what it means to not depend on government to tell us what to do, but to use our common sense that God has given us. So we're really encouraged by that. We still are trying to figure out exactly how this is going to look now in Africa, being about 30 days behind or 20 days behind. Then there's also, you know, just the questions on whether temperature does make a difference, whether the complications, even though, you know, in Africa, they're saying with Ebola, a lot of people died from Ebola, not because of Ebola, but because of complications from other things. And so they expect the same to be true with COVID, with AIDS and with malaria and with tuberculosis and things like that. It's going to complicate this illness. But, you know, again, we just don't know. We expected numbers, you know, to be skyrocketing, and they're not yet. Could this be an answer to prayer? Could it be a delay in time? Could it be a lack of testing? Africa overall is way, way, way far behind in terms of testing. And so there's just a lot of things that we don't know. So there's anxiety in that. There's feeling overwhelmed. There's the sense of, you know, what possibly could we do? And yet there's also this amazing comfort in knowing that God, you know, takes us time to whisper, to say, use your sphere of influence. And that's what we've been asking all of our leaders to do, is just use your sphere of influence and do the right thing and model that. And they've been doing amazing stuff. One of our teams in Nigeria, actually, Sarah and Kaduna, they used some of the money that they got to buy hand washing stations for every church and all the pastors' houses, because they knew that people would be going to the pastors' houses, and set that outside. And they went across denominations. Burkina Faso, they went to unreached people and they brought them food. And they actually now are building a new church in a village that never was welcome to have a church before, because of that action. So they've been really creative and listening to God in this. And we've been thrilled just to have such amazing partners who are there. I'm frustrated because I'm stuck here. I'm supposed to be in Nigeria right now. I was supposed to be in Thailand and Germany and then in Cameroon. And now I have to wait. I don't know whether our next trip will be canceled or not. But in the meantime, there's lots that we can be doing here. So thank you for asking and for your prayers.
Renita, what are some specific things we could be praying for you about?
One of the things that they're saying for Africa is, the ability to have access to the personal protective equipment, as well as the testing. That's critical. But food for us is, we're not a relief organization. And I've always, kind of railed against, unless it's an emergency, which this is, that we make sure that we focus on development. But this is an emergency, and we do need people to shelter in place. And I think that Africa is going to be having a hard time in the next year. So we do need wisdom for government leaders, but for church leaders as well. I mean, we need to develop a unified voice. We need to come together to figure out how to, address some of these issues. I've got some very specific people who have had challenges. Our team in Cameroon, especially. One of our team members' son was kidnapped week before last in the middle of COVID. They're having the civil war, and son was kidnapped as a means of getting a ransom. And her partner was attacked by armed robbers last week. And so both of our team members had these issues. And just prior to that team member also had her entire plantain farm burned down by a careless child in the community. So, there's COVID issues, but life doesn't stop in the meantime. I mean, our Kenya team is just, the mudslides that they're dealing with, the locusts that they're dealing with. In Uganda, they are just praying about all the armed robbery. People are hungry and they can't work, and so they are breaking in places left, right, and center. And so that's a lot, but it's just the complexity of the time that we're in, and for Africa, it feels like they don't get much of a break. So that's what breaks my heart, and I know it does yours too.
Oh, Renita, thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, no, thank you.